Thanks for being here, and thanks for my panel to be here, who will be introducing themselves in the next couple of minutes. We've all heard about the US military contracts. Even at FIDI, we are traditionally corporate movers, mostly. But we hear about that. We've been reading about it for, 3, 4, 5 years? 4 years. And finally, it is there. It is going to be implemented, apparently. And even I was reading about it in the past years, and I was like, oh, it's not really our concern. But then you look at the magnitude of it, it's like, my God, this is really big. And it may have an effect on our own business as well. God knows. So that's why we're doing this session. I want to ask these gentlemen to introduce themselves, and then we're going to talk about what that military contract that's going to one single provider with, I heard, 300,000 moves, what would that mean for the whole supply chain in the world? Will it have an effect? And if it has an effect, what kind of effect will it have? That's what we're trying to find out here. Although it's not implemented yet, I realize that, but it could have an effect. I'm going to ask, first of all, the gentlemen to introduce themselves. David?
Yep, thank you. Thank you, Jesse. I'm David Dance. I'm with the Suddath companies in Jacksonville, Florida. My role is to manage our Suddath International moving business, as well as our Sterling relocation and our RMC business. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Jack?
Good morning. My name is Jack Griffin. I'm the chairman and CEO of Atlas World Group, which is the holding company that owns Atlas Van Lines, Atlas International. We have an RMC, we have a logistics company, and we're based in Evansville, Indiana.
Mark?
Good morning. Mark Smet. I'm the CEO of the Gosselin Group, headquartered in Antwerp, Belgium. We actually have 3 divisions. One of them is the corporate moving sites. Another one is the logistics division. And we do have a US government division that deals with a lot of what we are going to be talking about today.
Thank you. Chuck?
Great. I'm Chuck White. I'm the president of the International Association of Movers for about that much longer. And this group, I'm not sure I can rate sitting up here with you guys. I mean, huge organizations, impactful organizations in our industry and potentially in this new program that we'll be talking about. But thank you, Jesse, for the invite. And
thank you, Chuck, for including Bangkok in your farewell tour, but that's what you're doing right now, isn't it?
I'm trying to rack up as many miles as I possibly can.
Chuck, as you're there here, maybe you, and as you're a neutral party like we are in this, maybe you can give a bit of a description of the scope of this contract, what it used to be, what it likely is going to be, so we have a good understanding of it. I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that.
Sure, just a couple of minutes, if I could, to give you a little background in case you haven't followed it. But it was probably around 2018 during the busy season in the summertime that there was a lot of negative publicity about the quality of the moving program for the U.S. Department of Defense. I'm trying not to use many acronyms if possible. And there was a new leader at the organization that oversees and runs the Department of Defense's, U.S. Department of Defense's moving program called U.S. Transportation Command. Was a 4-star general, the highest rank within the U.S. Department of Defense. And he thought there was a need for a change. We operated at that time and currently in an environment where companies had to become approved to operate in that program. And there were about 900 approved companies, and each move was then issued in what's called a government bill of lading to a single company, and the next move to another company, et cetera, et cetera. He looked at that and said, it's very inefficient. That's not the way that U.S. government contracting is typically handled. So he began a discussion to be able to take those 900 entities and really consolidate the program and give it to a single company. The thing that's really impactful, and I think you need to understand, and it really lays the groundwork for this, is the fact that there are well in excess of 1 million members of the U.S. military, and then additionally, we have the Department of Defense civilians, non-uniform personnel that also move. About a quarter of those folks move every year, many of them with multiple shipments, air freight shipments, permanent storage shipments, the obvious household goods personal effects shipments. And so the program encompasses around 350,000 shipments annually, and it is really reached almost a $3 billion program in transportation cost. So they issued a contract. The contract was awarded to a group that a few of the people are sitting up here in front of you. In our government contracting process, there's always the ability to protest and take the decision to court and on and on and on. And so that's what was done. There were a number of iterations that went on, and finally, after awards of contract, pulling back the contract, re-awards of the contract, pulling back on the contract, a final decision was made in November of this past year, and a transition process moved forward. The program is supposed to start moving in the U.S. Domestic market starting in September of this year, just following our very busy season. And that will transition that entire U.S. domestic program from September till we get to the busy season in 2024, so that all of the U.S. domestic business will be in the contract. And then following that peak season, that busy season, we'll start the international transition in September of 2024. And by the summer of 2025, the entire U.S. program on the DoD side will be handled by a single provider. That single provider is called HomeSafe, which is a combination of a giant government contractor called KBR, U.S. Government Defense Contractor, and an organization that is already involved currently in the current Department of Defense program called Tier 1. So that consortium will come together, start moving shipments under this contract, this approximately $3 billion annual contract in September of this year. So we're right there and ready to get started with this.
Well done in 5 minutes. Thanks so much. The share of international, the 350,000, how much is that more or less?
About 100 with U.S. air freight and the household goods, the surface shipments, about 160, 170,000. Okay. So again, significant amount of that being smaller air freight shipments.
Okay, just wondering, how many of you are currently involved in U.S. Department of Defense moving? Raise your hands.
There's a few.
Yeah.
That's quite a few.
More than we thought.
Yeah.
So the rest is not involved. How many of you are interested in getting involved in U.S. Department of Defense moving? Besides nobody else.
Well, here's what I would say real quickly. If you are interested, HomeSafe has a website that they are looking for people to just come on to, sign into, express your interest, what your capacity is, what your capabilities are, so that they can contact you. Because many of the barriers that were set up in the U.S. program previously are withdrawn. This contractor governs everything, oversees everything, decides who the subcontractors and all of the agents that will be involved in the program. So if you hadn't had an interest before, maybe because of the paperwork, maybe because of the rules and the nuances associated with doing U.S. DoD business, much of the barriers are gone now. So if you have any interest, you can take a look at it and see.
Thank you. But why should we be bothered, David? I mean, most of the FIDI movers are corporate movers. Why would they be bothered with the effects of a global household goods contract in the US? Why would we be bothered?
I think just for the reasons that Chuck was mentioning, it is 350,000 moves a year. I think that is of a size that it will change the way we do things, the way we price our business, the way things move, especially with one controlling entity who's going to be responsible for this program. It'll change the technology for those 350,000 moves. It'll change the flow. There are going to be new requirements on the agent, so I think we need to have an understanding. It will have, even though we're a corporate moving organization here, you saw the number of hands that went up that are involved to some degree. We've had a number of sessions in the last couple of days, and this concept of diversification of your business. I think it's important to understand what the opportunities are, and it is a new opportunity. There's an ability for companies to get involved simply by expressing their interest. We were chatting just before this. They are going to need all of us. They're going to need everyone who's doing the program today, and they're going to need everyone who isn't in the program today to make this successful. They're trying to change the quality nature of the military program, and I think relying on the quality that's provided through organizations like the FIDI agents is probably going to be the standard that they're going to be looking for in the U.S. military as well.
Would you agree with that, Jack? Because you referred to it, and so did Chuck. So the whole origin of this was that there was a perceived lack of quality and responsiveness. So FIDI, which is based on quality, let's face it, because you can't be into FIDI if you don't have proof of quality. Do you think those members stand a better chance, perhaps, of getting involved in the whole program?
I do agree, and I think Chuck's point is a good one, that, you know, the rules are completely different now under the GHC, the Government House of Good Contract. And, you know, it's hard, you know, Chuck alluded to the fact that there's some people up the stage here. Normally David's company and my company, we compete with each other in the United States, but the pursuit of this business made for some strange bedfellows. We were part of the winning group. April of 21, I think, we were called Team ARC. There was a steamship line, a large military carrier in Suddath, my company, and a couple of other organizations. And we were awarded this, at the time, $2 billion a year contract, immediately protested, as Chuck alluded to, and then it was re-awarded, so we won it twice. Not that that counts for anything. And I'm not bitter at all.
We learned that it doesn't count for anything.
We did, right. But that's the government. I'm sure the other governments in the room are no different than the American government. So eventually it ends up with the home safe. It is what it is. It is a disruption. And, you know, I always try and think of myself as terminally optimistic, where look at the glass as half full. There's an opportunity there. The one thing that none of us have mentioned yet, and I don't believe, and I stand to be corrected on this, that even as we sit here today, we don't know what the rates will be for domestic interstate moving in the U.S. or what they call OCONUS, or third country inbound U.S., outbound U.S., or, you know, third country other theaters around the globe. The rates, and again, someone in the room can correct me, but when I left the U.S. a few days ago, there was no pricing. So we had our Team ARC had submitted pricing. It was, you know, underbid by the eventual winning group, Home Safe, backed by KBR and Tier 1. They immediately applied for price relief to U.S. Transcom, to the Department of Defense in D.C., and again, to my knowledge, so that the whole thing, in my humble opinion, relies on, will the business be compensatory? Because I don't know about the folks in the room, but my company, we have no interest in changing 4 quarters for $1. We left that, you know, a decade ago. We're in business to make money. We believe we add value to the equation, whether it's an RMC, whether it's a corporate account, whether it's the consumer market, GSA, which is the American government, or whether it's the U.S. military. And we're as patriotic as the next man or woman, but we're not going to do it at a loss. So I think, you know, what the rates are become public domestically in the United States or in every country where the U.S. military participates around the globe, I think the whole program is going to hinge on that, is my opinion.
So, Mark, would you agree with that? Because in the end, 3-4 years ago, when the rates were submitted, the world has changed drastically. Meanwhile, things have gone up. So are we then maybe making a lot of fuss about nothing? Because nobody may be interested in this if you see the final rates.
No, I think what Jack just said is right on. Here you heard a number which Team ARC bid, and it was $2 billion. And here you hear Chuck saying that it should be $3 billion. That's a big number.
A billion. What's a billion?
Yeah, what's a billion, right? That's inflation.
I know $1 billion is not so much for the U.S. government, because their whole budget for defense is over $800 billion, so another $1 billion doesn't make a big difference. But this is exactly where this whole thing will evolve to. If they cannot get equal price adjustments to justify quality, then we may have a problem. And in 2018, as Chuck was saying, there were issues about quality. Well, in this military program, unfortunately, there have been a lot of problems in the past. The program, when it was still called a very competitive program, CRP, it was in many years non-compensatory, as we would call it. And a lot of the
Can you
TSPs,
clarify non-compensatory so we all know what we're talking about? What do you mean by that?
non-compensatory is basically that the rates don't cover your expenses. And we don't want to deal with business where we cannot at least make a profit, but we don't want to lose money. So that's non-compensatory. And in the older program, when it was CRP, often the rates were driven down until some of these forwarders, TSPs as we call them, went out of business, leaving agents and suppliers with unpaid bills. So when the program changed, I think in 2011, 2012, when it went to what they currently call DPS, there was an emphasis on more quality, and they started working with a rating system where the rates and the quality were combined, and not only the lowest rate was getting incentive tonnage. That changed the industry, and the business became, I think, more attractive. There is, of course, a big difference between the domestic piece of this contract and the international. And in the long run, I think a global contract can work, but the rates will be a very determinating factor. Because if the rates are not good to start with, then who is going to want to do the work?
What's the risk of this failing altogether? Can it fail?
Here's what I would say about that. Just a real quick clarification. So I said 3 billion, and Jack said 2 billion. We obviously know in the last few years what has happened with all of our costs and how we've had to adjust rates. There has been a significant increase in the transportation cost over the last few years in the U.S. Department of Defense program, and unfortunately for Home Safe Alliance, the contract winner, their bids were a few years ago. And now they're going to have to, we'll see, move under rates that were filed a number of years ago. Think about what your businesses were doing in terms of compensation in 2019, 2020 versus in 2023. I'm not so sure we could all go back and be able to do the work that we did at the pricing that we used to have, with increases in ocean rates, with increases in boxes, with increases in wood, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So if they don't come through with rates that are compensatory for the party who will take up the business, can this fail then?
No, they haven't put a contingency in, so there is no backstop for this.
Yeah.
So as Chuck mentioned, they're going to be running the parallel programs as they get it ramped up starting in September, but there is no backstop. Our team was not saying, oh, you're secondary. If it does fail, there's another solution there. There is no solution, so the U.S. government will provide more money one way or another into the program. So it's too big.
No plan B?
There is no plan B.
No,
it's too big to fail, so it will not fail.
You could
I've
state
heard that before, too big to fail. It scares the hell out of me.
But the plan B, and that's where the danger is, basically plan B is the current program, DPS. And when they start this transition and they will go from the current DPS program into the global household good contract, what the global household good contractor is going to offer business at rate X, but the other DPS players, the TSPs that file every year new rates, are going to offer for the same business price here.
Yes,
Then none of the capacity is going to go here, it's going to stay there.
of course.
And it might never get off the ground. This is
So
the
that would
risk.
be a fail then, in that case, if it never gets off the ground.
Right, so could they, during the ramp up, just revert back to DPS? That is a
Yeah,
possibility.
that's a possibility.
I think not. I don't believe. So the U.S. Department of Defense and the leaders in that program have sold our Congress on the fact that they are improving the services for military members and their families. I don't see any way in the world that they're going to go back to them and say, well, maybe we were wrong, we've failed, We don't think that's going, so I believe they're going to have to offer financial support
That's it.
to be able to prop this program up, to be able to have it be deemed at least at some level successful.
And I agree with Chuck's point, and pretty much everything's been said here, is that my spin on it's a little bit more sobering, where too big to fail, is that the right term? But there's a lot of political capital with, our elected officials, with the people that started this, and, every service member, man and woman, is deserving to get the same quality relocation as, somebody that we move who's in the C-suite, or someone that Suddath United moves in the C-suite or whatever. And we all know it all comes down to money. My more sobering approach is, I agree, I don't think they can let it fail. And what that translates to as an American is taking more taxpayer dollars and throwing it at the solution. So that kind of defeats the whole purpose from the get-go. And one of the key remits or objectives of the program 5+ years ago was to try and get the money from down to the curb, was the analogy. I don't know if that translates, but to the driver, to the packers, to the people actually doing the heavy lifting, not the move managers, of which there are a number of in the United States, not to the corporations, which we're viewed as, in a large organization. Get it to the driver and the crews so that the service members get that A+ relocation. Not to sound cynical, because I actually wish them success. I really do, genuinely. But I think it's going to be a challenge. David's team and my team, we saw the SOW, the scope of work that was awarded by the government. It is intense. It's very intense, and it's almost it's very, very difficult thing to execute and still make a couple of pennies at the end of it. So they bid lower than we did. We wish them well, and if they don't get the reprieve from U.S. Transcom and the Department of Defense, then there will be challenges, which I think we've all agreed upon.
100%.
So let's assume it's going to go forward. It will be implemented and successfully, I hope for everyone, and indeed some dollars will flow down all the way to the people who really need it. What would that mean then? I'm trying to wrap my head around this. There's like 300 current suppliers in military moving in the US, I believe, more or less?
Oh, more than that.
Even more than that.
But 900 TSP.
900,
So
okay.
we've
Fair enough.
used the term TSP,
Yes.
Transportation Service Provider,
Right.
is what TSP is. And these are entities that are doing business that are approved through a process by the U.S. government.
So now these guys have to go through one single contractor. Invariably, there are going to be some who will get business, some may drop out.
Those
That's
aren't,
right.
those aren't the asset companies. Those are just the bookers.
Oh,
So
they're just
that-
the bookers, okay.
They will
I'm trying to make
disappear.
this clear here. So
Good
that's
point. Good point. Yeah.
Basically, all of these 900 TSPs, which are the move managers that were in the middle,
Yeah.
they will disappear altogether.
So what are they going to do now? This is my question. They have a business, so they've got revenue from it. If they fall out, what are they going to do?
Buy.
Well,
Is it
some of them,
So-
so
so-
my
so-
organization is both.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's
my
right. You can be
organization is a
both.
TSP and,
Uh-huh.
and a service provider. So
Okay.
we have assets, we have crews, we do both sides of it. I think it's the elimination of the part of the 900 that
Is-
can't provide the services to the-
Non-asset based.
But they're not going to disappear. They may find something else to do. So
They'll
may
try to.
May
but-
they turn to corporate moving all of a sudden, because that will affect us.
That 100%. So there will be many that will try to do that. I think most that are operating in the U.S. Department of Defense's program that are non-asset based entities probably have very little chance to all of a sudden pivot and find new territory to operate in. I personally believe, unfortunately, a number of them are members of my organization, that they will fall by the wayside.
But they will try.
Though, of course, they'll try.
And therefore be a little bit upsetting and disturbing the whole corporate moving model. I saw you shaking no there.
Well, maybe also to put some perspective on it, if you talk about 900 TSPs, about 750 of these TSPs are dealing with the domestic market.
Okay.
Only about 150 are dealing with the international market. From the 150, in the last year and a half, already 30 or 40 closed their doors. They know that it's
In
over.
anticipation of what was going to
In
happen.
anticipation of what is happening. And this year and next year, we will see more people stepping out of this business. Now, many of these TSPs, some of them only have 2 people in the office or 3. Unlike a company like Suddath, they have maybe a couple hundred people in your US department that are involved with it. But all these smaller TSPs, they will just close their doors. They cannot get into our corporate moving business. That's not going to happen.
No.
But what would you do?
Domestically, a
Sorry?
lot of these TSPs, are also not doing a lot of work, and that was the problem that the government or US Transcom had.
Yeah.
They were just clipping a coupon. They were giving their TSP code, the percentage of work they were getting, they were giving it to a move manager who was then basically doing the work.
I see.
And that's the layer that, because of this contract, will be eliminated.
So what will your couple of hundred people in TSP will be doing then if that layer kind of disappears? Are you going to assign them to corporate moving, international, domestic? What do you?
So we'll have to look at that. Right now, our government services team supports ITGBL as well as the Department of Defense. So we have international teams as well as domestic teams. As Chuck laid out, we know that our domestic teams will continue to be busy at least into 2024. We know our international teams will be busy at least into 2025. But we will be looking at ways to continue to evolve our organization. And I still think that there have to be some conversations with HomeSafe of how is it that they're going to support the program. There may be roles for some of those 200 people to support it. We have assets throughout the U.S. as well, so we're going to have to manage those assets in support of the military program for HomeSafe, and some of them can move to that area of the business. So I think that we need to be looking at evolving what those 200 folks do. We may pivot to or diversify into, more heavily into Department of State and other areas rather than focusing on the military. But I think that there will be a role. It would be hard for me to believe that the players in the program today across some of the larger TSPs, that their knowledge, their experience won't be extremely useful for HomeSafe.
How would it work for you, Jack? Is that similar?
It's the same but different. So part of our organization is a $700 million US van line. So van lines are unique to the US and Canada, very different than the rest of the world. So of that $700 million, about 20% of it is military. So roughly, $140 million. That, if we did nothing, that would evaporate and go away. So there's a risk. It's not the bulk of what we do, but it's still a chunk of money, right? So we will work with HomeSafe if they're interested in having Atlas and its 300 American agents participate in the new program. And again, if it's compensatory, I'm going to keep coming back to that, because we like to make money in what we do. So if it is compensatory, a number of my agents would be glad to provide services, storage, hauling, OA, DA, et cetera, for the new program. If it's not, then we'll go and pursue other lines of business to replace that $140 million that disappeared.
So, Mark, as corporate movers, we're used to dealing with multi-million-dollar companies like RMCs and negotiate rates and conditions, etc. If some of them or existing ones start negotiating with HomeSafe, this is a multi-billion-dollar company. That's a different ballgame, isn't it? For the average mover, it is. I mean, you're used to it, but not everybody's used to that.
No, but I think it's as we have said all along from the beginning, it's a very niche market. It's the US DoD business.
Yeah.
And you cannot compare that with any other business. The impact of what will happen in the industry, in my view, is it will have an impact on technology because they will invest heavily in a technology piece, is what it was written in their RFP, the way that they will deal with it. So the technology partner or the platform that they will build obviously may be used by the industry for other services. Whether it will impact corporate business, my personal opinion, not very quickly. Maybe 10 years from now, but before they get this fully under control, then there are other very large similar government contracts that they might be looking at. And in the US, of course, you have your State Department business, GSA business. That could be fitting into this business model. But the traditional corporate accounts, I don't see them going after that business right away. Then again, I'm not reading their minds, so they may have other plans, but at this point, I don't see that happening very quickly.
So I understand that. So they probably will look at other US departments and see what they can do for them. What of outside the US? Or is KBR?
See,
Chuck?
I'm not sure that I fully agree. I do believe that when we take 2.5, 3, 2, I don't know how many billions of dollars, and put that in the hands of a single entity, and the market share that we're talking about them controlling, it scares me. It puts a question in my mind about the entire environment and where they will look next to be able to do business. Because when I have control of such a large segment, we've never had a single entity have 20% of the world's traffic, 25%, whatever the number is, the estimates are out there, then in my own mind, I think they would be silly not to say, what else is there out to control we can get our hands on? And that's for the folks that are in this audience that do not do Department of Defense business now and think about, why should I be concerned about this, or why should I watch this? Jesse and Mark, I think you're 100% right. It's not tomorrow, but when they get their hands around and control and fully start to implement the Department of Defense's program, a number of you I know are involved in the U.S. Department of State program. You're involved in other agencies, movements of personnel within the U.S. government. I don't see why they won't look around and say, what other areas of business can we try to look at, because we've got this huge market share. So when, I can't tell you. How quickly, I can't tell you. But I believe if there's any level of success in this program, then with the market share, the volume, the control of capacity, I think they would be silly not to look elsewhere.
But it's the quantity of volume that will count in that case, because we've had in the past other investors looking into the corporate market, trying to invest into our moving relocation world, and kind of seeing after a few years, hang on, this is not the margin that we were looking for, and they pull out again. Is there enough margin in the market for companies like KBR?
Maybe,
David?
maybe not. I think these three would know much better than I about the margins and what the flexibility is within the marketplace to adjust to something like this.
It's an interesting point, Jesse, because what Chuck is saying is that, or Mark had made a comment a few minutes ago about, we have these move managers. Part of David's company has one. There's a company called TMM, Tier 1, that is part of the winning consortium. They added significant value. My company outsourced the management of the military TSP because they're quite efficient at it. What happens is a number of those, a couple of the big ones, are actually private equity owned. They're not owned by John Smith, who started this company and built it up. They're owned by PE companies. That it's something that we're seeing in the North American market, where they come in and all they see is the cash coming in. They don't understand the business like we do. They don't really care about it. It's nothing more than a financial transaction. And maybe some of the people in the audience have had an experience. And so we're seeing, RMCs. We have some RMCs here. We have RMCs as customers. They're being acquired by private equity concerns. So they see an immediate transaction, buy, 2 to 4 years, hold, and then spin it, and then make a multiple, and then they're gone. But does that really help the industry? Does it help the people in this room? I would suggest to you that it does not. you know, because it's purely a financial transaction. Will the GHC contract be one of those? It's not owned by a private equity company, it's owned by, at the end of the day, the taxpayers of the United States, but, you know, the US Transcom. And again, I think we all want to provide great service to the servicemen and women around the world. That is the goal, but if you can't do it and make money at the same time, and I know I'm a broken record on this one, but that's all to be determined in the future.
Well, I mean, KBR, who is really the prime contractor of the GHC, is a publicly traded company.
Right.
And so who are they beholding to? Their stockholders.
Yeah.
And so that's also, so we're talking private equity involvement, we're talking publicly traded companies. This is a brave new world in the U.S. government arena.
Yeah.
It's called FAR contracting, Federal Acquisition Regulations, and that is a very, very different environment than what the household good transportation arena has been previously for the Department of Defense. And so this is why some of these entities are looking at it, because you're talking about a contract. Again, if it goes, the first 3 years of this contract is what's been awarded.
Yep.
Then there are option years beyond that. If it goes to the full length of the potential of this contract, I believe it's going to push $20 billion in gross revenues. I mean, again, there's nothing like that in
But talking about
our
the providers
industry.
at the bottom who are providing the work in the end.
Yeah. Well, that's
What's it like for them to negotiate a contract like that with those huge companies? I just trying to imagine that.
I don't think there's going to be negotiation.
It's just pushing now.
It's going to be
Take it or leave it.
dictation. It's going to be,
Take it or leave it.
here's what the rates that we are offering you. They don't have the ability to, literally, it's going to take thousands of entities to be able to service 350,000 shipments on an annual basis. With that being in place, they can't individually, I don't believe, negotiate arrangements with every single service provider. I think their philosophy is going to be, we're going to give you a certain volume at this particular rate. If you will service that contract, then we'll help you in the busy season, but we'll even benefit you then with more work in the non-busy season. So I don't think it's going to be, what pricing will you give me to be able to do this work? Here's the pricing that we're offering. If you're willing to do it at this rate, then we'll work with you.
Mark, a bit earlier, Chuck said invited those who are interested to go to the Home Safe Alliance website and you know, get information, etc. Would you welcome that? And I'm not talking about the final pricing, but from the specificities of doing that work for the military, you think, what's that chance on easily getting in there?
Well, I haven't been on their website.
No, but you know the
I
work.
think you can go to the website and can check it out, but you will not find a lot of information there. All you can do is register your company, and then you're in the system.
But talk about the specifics of the operational work for military, which is very specific and different from corporate moving
Well,
usually.
the specifics, those that are handling the business, and there was a lot of people in the room that are doing it, they know what these specifics are. The biggest differentiator between this DoD work or the government work and the corporate work is the fact alone that all of this work is packed in wooden lift fence when we talk about international business. That by itself eliminates a lot of movers that cannot accommodate that kind of work, because it takes a completely different infrastructure to handle DoD work in lift fence versus corporate moves. And that means people that are today doing corporate move and are interested in getting into this military work, they better think about it, because it requires more warehouse space, forklifts, carpentry shops. You need to have a lot more infrastructure than for the normal moves. So I don't see, honestly, I don't see that those people that are in this business today, they will stay in it. Will there be more new entrants coming in? I don't think so, because it's very specific. But everything will, again, depend on the rates. And if they offer a certain rate, then it's those people that have the infrastructure and that want to do that business that will have to make up their mind, can we make this work or not? There will be savings that can be made in the systems versus how it works today, because today it's very fragmented because you have so many different players.
Right.
A very big element, for example, is the lift fence. Right now, all these lift fans are owned by 100 different TSPs. If you put all these lift fans in one system, there can be some savings. But again, everything will have to work itself out in the next several months.
Just briefly from a sustainability standpoint, how long will that survive, that lift fan obligation to use for all the shipments?
Wow. That's a great question, one I hadn't even really thought about in terms of the sustainability perspective. Again, when I was in the business, I sat on the other side of the table. We did DoD business, but we also did corporate work as well, and loose load into containers was the way of the world. And if that's good enough for a corporate executive, a CEO for an organization, I'm not sure why it's not necessarily good. Well, I'll tell you why. It's not good for the DoD because about 70%, maybe a little less, a little more, depending on time of year, go into storage. And so they want to try to do as little double handling,
Sure.
multiple handling of shipments. So put it into this wooden container, let it sit until it's time for delivery, open it up and deliver. My experience in the corporate world is much smaller number of shipments are involved with
Correct.
storage. You're going to have it in that container. You're going to deliver it in that container when that individual is ready for it.
A footnote to the discussion is that there's one very positive thing in my view in the SOW from with the GHC, and that's what they call the U.S. military calls a living wage. So it's a dictate from the military that says you will pay everybody that works on a shipment a living wage. Now, what that is in Alabama might be different than in New York State, that it might be in the UAE or in Japan or whatever. And obviously, the intent is to make sure that some of that money does get to the curb that we talked about a while ago. That means you get a better quality crew. That means you get a better quality service overall. What it translates the other way is that it raises your cost structure in trying to provide that. So again, it's well-intentioned, but just trying to execute that, you won't be going to Home Depot in the United States to get labor to go and load furniture onto a truck. That won't be happening anymore and paying somebody $10 or $12 an hour, because if you were audited, you'd be suspended from the program right away. Good intention. We'll see how it plays out.
Let's talk a little bit about technology. You already touched upon it earlier. I think, what's it called, the system that HomeSafe uses?
HomeSafe Connect.
HomeSafe Connect. And is that owned by KBR or by?
Owned by HomeSafe Alliance. Their technology partner is a company called Move HQ, who has been in the non-government DoD space, but they are partnering with HomeSafe Alliance to build them an IT solution. Some very interesting. We haven't seen it as of yet in full operation, which concerns me just a little bit. Mm-hmm. But there's technology on the government that has to be implemented as well that we haven't seen. So I think these are both going to be a bit of limiting factors in how quickly the program rolls out and grows. We've got to have these IT solutions in place. They've got to be able to be integrated together. There's a third system that has to also come into play. That is the payment system with that's utilized by one of the banks. U.S. Bank in the United States. So there's got to be a number of systems that have to be finalized first and then connected with one another secondly.
Big concern for you, Mark? You're a big provider to the U.S. military right now, or?
That's a good question. If I had the answer, I could tell you, but I don't know yet. The only thing I know is that at this very moment, in the recent road shows that HomeSafe Alliance has put up, they are making it very clear that HomeSafe Connect will be their IT solution.
One system.
And they will not allow agents to write APIs or connect with that system, everything will have to be put into their system
Yeah.
manually or in one form or another.
Is that an opportunity for the rest of the world, as far as technology is concerned?
I think it's an opportunity to learn from, as Chuck mentioned, from what the success is or the failure is of the technology and how it moves forward. But there is an opportunity. I think Mark's organization is going to be, or organizations like have to be part of the solution. They do have the ability to provide some of the consolidation efficiency opportunities that I'm sure HomeSafe's going to have to be looking at in order to make this work. So using the technology and working with companies like Mark's, I think will be very important for HomeSafe. So I think there's an opportunity for all of us to watch what happens in this technology space and see if the HomeSafe Connect is going to be the way 350,000, 450,000 shipments are moved every year, and you have 1,000, 2,000 service providers who are working in HomeSafe Connect. We all talk all the time. It would be great if our systems could talk to. What if that does become the way we do business 10 years from now? It's not going to be next year, but 10 years from now, is there going to be a platform that we're going to be able to work from? And just one other thing that I think we touched on, whether or not, where does KBR HomeSafe stop and can they take this further? Some of the things that have been asked of the new program around taking over entitlement counseling, so that understanding policy, taking over the quality management, taking over the technology ask. Those are the type of things that we do in the corporate space as well, and our corporate customers expect of us. So it's not too hard to believe that 10 years from now, 5 years from now, that those opportunities will be looked at very carefully by that group.
Yeah, I agree.
Before going to the audience for some questions, just a final question, and I think the premise here was that will this be a game changer for the moving world that we are living in as FIDI traditionally corporate moving? Yes or no? One by one, yes or no?
Yes,
in the next 5 years, let's put it there.
For our industry, yes.
It's a
for
game
everyone in this room, I'm not quite sure how involved they will be, but for our industry, absolutely.
No. Jack?
Yeah, it's a disruptor, for sure. Time will tell whether it's a positive. The taxi company fought Uber, and Uber won, and now some of us don't go anywhere unless we get in an Uber, right? So that was a good disruption. Only time will tell whether this one is for the betterment of the service members of the United States military.
Mark?
Short term, I don't think so, but after 5 years, a lot of things may change.
Positive?
And well, positive, that's hard to say.
It's always nice to end with positive.
Look at what Jack said is exactly the case. Everybody uses Uber today, and I think many of us think it's better than a taxi. So it could be, in the long run, that this solution will be something that everybody might be using, but I don't see it happening in the next 5 years.
One of the sessions yesterday spoke to the technology, and we had a number of panelists who all were investing X millions of dollars into their technology and talking about how it would be great if they linked together. And one of the people spoke around the Uber experience, and everyone pretty much agreed that our industry doesn't have that player who can invest $180 million or $1 billion into technology to create the Uber experience. Well, I think we finally now have an organization who has enough money that could create the Uber technology. It might not be now, but we finally have that entity. RMCs don't have enough money to make that type of investment, but this KBR organization, understanding that they might have a $20 billion contract on their hands, we finally have an organization that may create that Uber technology for our industry.
Chuck, finally, game changer, yes or no?
Game changer 100%. Positive or negative is the question. I'm with Dave. We are such a stratified industry. I mean, there are some big companies, but when we start talking about the numbers that this new organization may be able to flow through, there's no question that makes it a game changer. And so we'll see. And the technology side is a big piece of it, is a big piece.
Thank you all. I'm going to turn to the audience now, and hopefully there will be some questions right up there. Do we have a microphone?
I knew it had to be one of the technology guys.
Hi everyone, Carlos Ferry from ShipEasy. I think it's an interesting conversation here because one of the things we forget quite often is the moving industry. It's a quite big industry, but the supply chain is 100 times bigger. And we quite often forget that there are solutions already available. There are already problems being solved. There is already ecosystems being built. But we completely forget to look at outside of the industry to see what it's being done and bring it to our industry and apply. And yesterday in the panel, we said exactly about that. Who is willing to take a leap of faith and do it?
Yep.
The movers. Not Home Safe Alliance, not KPR. If we actually say yes to them, then one of you guys already said, you're just probably going to be working for them. Is that what we want? We want an Uber to come and actually have the issue with everybody has and keep working for them. So I think it's an interesting aspect what they're trying to do, but as movers, in the end of the day, that's what all the families are expecting. It's a better quality move. So the technology is the how, it shouldn't be the ending game.
Yeah.
Just give the experience. And talking about integrations and all that kind of thing, I shouldn't even have that conversation. Integration should just work like that. In the world we are, the customers, the ending customer, the consignee, he just wants the experience. So I think the moving industry has the power to tell anybody to say, hey, yes, we can do it. Who's going to take the leap of faith? So that's one of the things I would like to see, and I know that some of the big companies are already doing that, but I think that's really where the conversation should be going, not expecting someone to come like Uber and bring that solution to the industry, but the industry can go to anybody and say, if you want to come into this industry and do whatever you want to do, that's what we expect.
But when, I would say, when an entity like this is going to come to the marketplace and say, I've got 350,000 shipments. Do you want some of this? Here's the cost, or here's the revenue that you can generate. But the other piece of it is you've got to use my technology. And one of the things that is not in play on the corporate side is there are many government, U.S. government rules about interacting with systems that connect directly to U.S. government systems. And so the integrations, the APIs, those kinds of things, there are a lot of questions being asked about that right now. And HomeSafe is very reluctant to talk about that type of thing because that's an entryway. It's a portal that leads to government systems, and the government is saying, no, no, no. It's going to be an interesting discussion. I think there are ways potentially around it because the negative about this is I'm going to have to go to HomeSafe system and key in information. There's no automated fashion to get it in there. Then I'm going to have to turn to my own system and I'm going to have to dispatch and put information in and be able to get that out. I don't know what other systems are going to have to be in play. The duplication, the repetition, the potential errors that come from that, it's taking us in the wrong direction.
I don't know if there is anybody from Grace here, but 10 years ago, Toll in Australia, they've done exactly what Home Safe Alliance is doing. Exactly the same. They built a software, they did not allow integrations, and if Grace is here, at least I know then, they had issues, everybody had issues, and it just did not work.
But that's 10 years ago. Let's face it, 10 years ago, there's a different time right now.
They still not allowing integration today, 10 years later. That's exactly my point. The moving industry should push and said exactly what Chuck said. Hey guys, yes, of course we want those moves. 420,000, why not? But we need to do also in the term, as you said, everybody needs to make money.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the questions are already being asked. HomeSafe is doing what they're calling town halls. They're going around, because it's starting in the U.S. business, they're going around the U.S. asking potential partners to come in and listen to how they plan to operate as this moves forward. And the questions are being asked of them. Yes, we see your HomeSafe Connect, and that's what we're going to be utilizing. But the inefficiencies that you're building don't make a lot of sense to us. And so they're taking some of this back and looking at how they can do a better job of implementing this technology.
I would say one thing in HomeSafe's defense is that they couldn't do it with more than one system. A logistical system around the globe, you know, if you had 49 disparate systems, it would fail in the first 30 days. You must dictate, I mean, like it or not, it's going to be driven, whoever the vendor is, and it's, you know, Move HQ, which they have a VC-owned parent called Updater in New York City, you know, fine if they develop it, but it has to be the same system in Okinawa as it is in Fayetteville, North Carolina, as it is in the south of Germany or whatever it might be. It just, there is no other, so for those of us that have spent, you know, most of our careers in logistics, that there is no other option. So.
The power of the purchaser plays a role here.
Well, just continuity,
Yeah.
you know, and the whole quality system is in there. What they really want is, and I guess we all want, is an Amazon-like experience. That's what they want for the service member, you know, and we all do. Let's see if they can get that deliverable.
Bill, you had a question?
More comment than a question. Being a TSP on both sides, I'm an asset-based TSP. We don't actually perform the services because there's not enough money in it today, but we book the services to somebody else that does it, except for the storage. And having attended the HomeSafe town halls, everyone in the room walked away with way more questions than answers.
Yep.
And everybody wanted to know one thing: what are you going to pay me? And they didn't answer the biggest question. So I don't see it working myself right away, but I'm not as optimistic as Jack.
Any comments to that?
Yeah, I would say you're 100% right. The ultimate question is, what's the compensation? But it's also, what are the terms? How long before you pay me? How are claims going to be handled? There are multiple questions that the details have not surfaced as of yet, but it goes back to their request for an equitable adjustment. They have their contract that was awarded. Here's the money that we said that we were going to receive through this contract. But oh, by the way, we've been through a pandemic, a 100-year event. We've been through inflation that hasn't been seen for decades. A number of economic factors are in play. We say we need X amount more. The amount of money that they are going to have to be able to perform this contract, it's not a number this big. It's a number this big. And the government has yet to be able to tell them, okay, we're going to agree to pay you your contract plus. And so before they find that out, they need to be able to have that information before they can tell what compensation is going to be. One of the other interesting things, and it's probably very interesting for the three gentlemen that are right here, I've talked quite frequently with the CEO and the president of HomeSafe Alliance. Initially, they told me they were going to have to hire between 1,000 and 1,200 people to be able to handle this contract. First off, I don't know where they're going to get 1,000 people that have any expertise at all to be able to work on this contract. So they're going to have to, I believe, come back to some of the entities that are sitting in front of you and say, we're going to have to find a way to partner, but they can't necessarily tell them what the compensation is going to be for these guys until they find out. I mean, we're talking about, I've talked to these guys, 25, 26%. Well, you're talking about over a 3-year contract, this initial contract, another $1.5 billion. We're talking numbers. It sounds like, I don't know how many of you played Monopoly, but it's like Monopoly. It's like fake money. $1 billion here, $1 billion there.
Still sounds attractive for some of us.
I always
Any other
like
questions
Monopoly.
from the audience?
You had one in the
Over there
back.
in the back. That's Shmuel, I think, right?
Looking ahead, do you see state buying into this as well?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Here, I'll take that, then I'll be interested in what these guys, I've talked to them about this. I talked to them about this a year and a half ago or more. They're looking over their shoulder. When 90% of government business is handled under a single contract with a single provider. If, I can't say that enough, it proves successful, I know there's going to be elements within the US government go, we're moving everybody 90% over here. Why the heck are we moving this other 10% or so in a different form, in a different process? Does that make sense? And I will say those guys, when I talk to them, their eyes get about this big, and I think there is concern that it may be dictated to them what they're going to do. Do they want to do it? I would say probably not.
Jack, what do you think?
I would agree with Chuck. I think it's all contingent on whether it's successful or not, but, you know, it's interesting in dealing with the government. Chuck's way closer to this than what I am, but there is major friction between the Navy and the rest of the military, between State Department and, you know, GSA, and they're all siloed. I know it never happens in any other country, but, you know, you have some bureaucracy that happens with our government, so and they're all very protectionistic of their budgets and everything. I think if there's overwhelming success with the Home Safe solution, I think they'd be forced from the highest level to take a look at it.
Any other questions? Who is still interested in going into US Department of Defense? Show your hands, all of you.
I know one
got one
guy
there.
who brings
Yeah, of course.
In that case, I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank Chuck, Mark, Jack, and David for being on this panel and giving us a bit more insight in what the effect could be of this contract about to come. And we'll watch it and see what's happening.
That's all we
But
can
thanks
do.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.